Paul?
Oh, yeah, I got it.
Did you receive my?
Yes, I did.
Did you see any corrections?
I.
Okay. Who else? Mr. Shaw? No.
I got it.
You said at 9 o'clock, so I.
Oh, yeah. The U-Haul. No, it is a truck. Good evening. Oh, and that didn't work out. So
She says I like texting me for messaging you back on.
No, but my text the next morning. The next morning.
She's available at all hours just to
To read your emails?
very important.
That's it? Okay.
He admitted to me. We have to get next one. I was in he admitted to me a couple times. Loaded up with a couple things. No. This guy.
Why are you cleaning parts? We're trying to take this stuff. Why are you cleaning? Leave my stuff. Yeah, stay on your side.
Joyce, you're gonna have to separate us. He doesn't play well with us.
Well, when he's no longer your vice president, it'll be fine.
I am gonna have to separate you. We're gonna have to make some changes.
Did the vice president sit down at the end?
You put him over there.
I can sit right in the middle of both of you.
There you go. You're like the most important person anyway.
So that way, when you guys get out of here, I'll show you.
Right, 2 days.
Move down over here. Load them off the island altogether.
Hi, Jim.
Good to see you.
I don't know. Me? I guess it's for whatever it's worth, but I don't care.
The clock says
57 or something, I don't know. The clock says I mean,
I call this meeting to order. If you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which
which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please.
Mr. Bittner,
Here.
Mr. Lunder,
Here.
Mrs. Moore, here, Mr. Shaboo,
Here.
Mr. Morris,
Here.
Mr. Johnson,
Here. Approval of the minutes for the regular meeting of council, July 12th, 2022. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So made.
Made by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mr. Bittner. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mr. Lunder.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye. Correspondence, clerk, is there any correspondence tonight?
I have no correspondence.
Does any member of council have correspondence tonight? Mr. Morris?
Yes, President Johnson, I received a couple of emails from Dorinda Meyer on Sharon Drive concerning Airbnbs. She thought that those were illegal in our city based on a conversation she thought she had with Mr. Moore some time ago. And I said, my memory serves me that they're permitted as long as they register with the city. And I'm pretty sure that's correct, right? Correct?
We have not banned them in the city.
Okay, so that was it.
If I'm not mistaken, you're not allowed to ban them. Is that correct, Mr. Lyons? That the state Supreme Courts or the state courts have decided that we can't put, or the legislation, specific regulations on them beyond. I'll let you get back on that one.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with.
Either the court or it was a legislation that goes. I just remember seeing something about, but that's fine.
Yeah, I don't recall. Yeah, I know that many communities regulate. A lot of communities are interested in doing it. I'm not aware of it.
Yeah, I didn't think they're allowed to, but anyway, administration and department head reports. Mayor and Safety Director, Mr. Eva, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Johnson, members of council, public here this evening. I'm going to turn it over to Ryan and Emil from the Envision Group to give their presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for inviting us, council, to give you guys a little bit of background on who we are and our planning process. Of everyone who's been here today. This is a big crowd usually for a council meeting. But my name is Ryan Smalley. I'm with Envision. With me today is Emil Wisnansky. I guess to sort of just start through the slide deck. On page 2 there, just a little bit about who we are. We started this company 6 years ago. We're based in Cleveland and Columbus. We've worked together 4 times throughout our careers. We started as engineers, as co-ops with the Ohio Department of Transportation. And over time, we've worked for large consulting firms together. We both went to school to be planners, got our planner certification, and was also a lawyer. So he has a lot of letters behind his name. But that technical background that we have both from engineering and Emil's law degree help us sort of think broad and big, but also be able to drill down and see some challenges to some of the ideas that might come out of a comprehensive plan or an area plan. We've been doing this for 17 years. A lot of our experience with Envision has been comprehensive master plans, a lot of land use planning, active transportation planning. We're pre-qualified with NOACA to do active transportation plans throughout the region. We also do economic development plans and a lot of implementation work. And I think that's where we're a little bit different than the other planning consultants, is that we look to implement the plan that we help create. So, the implementation level varies depending on the community and how much they want our services after the plan is completed. But we focus on putting actionable recommendations together and then giving you a process, steps forward as to how to complete, whether it's a land use or an economic development tool or a grant. we try to set you up so that you can go after grant funding on the heels of the plan. We've been very successful in writing grant applications for a plethora of different funding agencies from the federal level all the way down to ALACA and getting money through the regional NPO. On page 3 there, I'll just kind of highlight some of our work. Again, a lot of comprehensive planning, economic development planning, with a focus on implementation. We've done plan work at all different types of scales, from the statewide level all the way down to the local level. I would say the majority of the work that we do is at the local level, working with cities and townships and villages to get their vision, their goals in order, and help prioritize recommendations for them. On page 4, page 4, just a sampling of some of the projects we've done in the region. Most of our work has been in Ohio. We have worked in 5 or 6 different states, but I would say the majority of our work has been in Ohio, and a lot of it in the Cleveland area. We've done comprehensive plans. We're finishing one up right now in Aurora. We've worked with them multiple times. City of Brunswick, North Royalton, villages of Poland, which is around Youngstown. We have a lot of work down in Cincinnati as well. City of Madera is one of our longest running clients. We've been working with them for 4.5 years. 4.5 years. We did their first comprehensive plan in 2018. They've been a city for 70 some odd years, never had a plan, went down there and put a plan together, implementable plan, and we've been working with them ever since implementing the recommendations out of that plan. Also, there's some samplings of some economic development planning we've done, the city of Conneaut, Geauga County, as well as some active transportation planning throughout the region. A lot of that working with the MPO and LACA, looking at bike lanes and sidewalks and connectivity and how to improve corridors. On the next page, really it's just a sort of an overview of why to have a plan, why to plan in general. I think it's really important to have a plan, particularly if you're looking towards implementation, towards changing something. It's hard to have a vision and goals if you don't go through a process to talk to the public, and talk amongst yourselves, and talk to stakeholders to sort of get an idea of what the community and what council and what staff want to see in the city going forward. The plan really helps establish that vision and goals so that you have a defensible document that you can say, hey, we went to the public, we talked amongst ourselves, these are the goals and objectives that we came out of this planning process with. And when, let's say, a developer comes in that wants to develop something, a piece of property that isn't consistent with that plan, you can point back to that plan and say, hey, look, we don't want this, and here's the plan to support that evidence, instead of kind of, oh, here came development, we don't really have a plan. Well, we don't want that. What do we do? If it gets kind of, you get in a sticky situation at times. But other reasons to plan are that you do get a broad sense of public engagement with a plan. When we do plans, we try to engage the public at many different levels, both online and in person. Now that COVID is sort of hopefully behind us, we like to get out into the community, not just in public meetings or talking to steering committee, but also getting out and going to events and being there where there's an event in the city where we can have little pop-up tents and ask people questions, do community surveys, try to get the voice of the entire community rather than just people who are concerned about one specific issue. It also gives you a chance to talk to stakeholders, which is really honestly very important. Potentially, these stakeholders could be funders for improvements that you're looking to do over time. Conduct a plan, you can talk to the LACAs and all these entities that have money, and you can align your goals with their goals, and if they're involved in the process, are more likely to fund projects going forward. It gives you a chance to engage that community as well. We also, when we put a plan together, look to put actionable recommendations together, so you have a list of ideas to move forward with and to implement. And most importantly, prioritize. set of recommendations, putting together an implementation matrix where the council or staff have a chance to prioritize what improvements are most important. And then putting together, not just a list of funding sources for you to go after, but specific sources of funding that would help you achieve those goals. So I think there's a lot of reasons to plan, and I don't know where you guys are at in that process, but felt like we should just maybe share a little bit of why putting a plan together is a good idea. On the next page, it's just a sample planning process, sort of our typical planning process for a comprehensive plan or an area plan. Typically, those types of plans range in time from 6 months to a year to complete, depending on how much public engagement they're interested in doing. Usually that's sort of the driver. But we have a 4-phase approach. I know it's very high level, very general, but the first phase, the identify phase, we really look to put together a vision statement, put together a steering committee, define what that public engagement process will look like throughout the plan. How are we going to engage the public? What are we comfortable with? How much? How little? And really establish the goals. What are the goals? What are the focus areas? In phase 2, which we call the assessment phase, we'll really be looking through zoning codes, looking at existing infrastructure, trying to assess all the existing conditions within the city, any existing plans that exist, assessing those, trying to get a sense of what's going on. Then phase 3 is the recommendations phase, where really is the longest phase, and where we do a lot of back and forth with you and the public to sort of first assess what we think we've heard in the beginning of the process and what recommendations really make sense, and then bouncing those ideas back off of you as the public to refine those recommendations so that they are sort of the voice of the community. And then what I think is the most important is phase 4, which is the implementation phase, where we look to prioritize recommendations, have actionable steps to implement those recommendations, and put together an implementation matrix so you can prioritize improvements over time. Come back every 6 months and reassess the plan and say, hey, is this still a priority? Are we still looking to do this?
We get to turn it
Oh,
on.
okay.
You're okay.
And throughout that whole process, we'd be engaging the public, getting ideas and feedback on those recommendations and feedback on the final plan. On that next slide there, it's just an example of public engagement that we've done in the city of Madera. As I said, we've been working with them for 5 years now. They set the bar very high for engagement. There's a lot of engagement on this list, but that infographic on the right summarizes what we did from a community engagement perspective, not just the basic public meetings, not just the community surveys and meeting with the steering committee. We also met with the business community, which I think is extremely important when you're looking at a long-range plan and you're looking at how a corridor might develop, talking to your existing business owners, getting some ideas on what they feel are important. I think informs the plan very well. We also had 9 outreach events where we went out into the public. They had a lot of events in this area. So there was a ladies' night out. We were there with a pop-up tent, some boards, and asking some questions that were a priority to the community that we established when we talked to the steering committee the first couple meetings. There's a sample of one of the boards on the left of that slide over there. It's something real simple, pictures, footprints and things, just to kind of give us an idea of what direction we should be heading. And then the next slide, just again, what I feel is the most important part of a plan is implementation. It's just list some of the successes that we've had over the last 6 years implementing plans. Been able to successfully secure over 50 million in grant funding for our clients over the last 6 years. There's a sampling on the left of some of the larger ones. City of Pontiac helped them get a port infrastructure grant from USDOT I'm pretty sure their annual budget was.
About 12 million, so that was a $19 million, $19.5 million grant, so 1.5 times basically their budget, which was.
And there's a couple others on there. You know, again, we've written grants for USDOT, ODOT. There's a whole listing over there on the left-hand side, but we really know the funding sources very well and try to, as we're putting a plan together, are always thinking about how can we leverage this, who can we leverage this with, and how can we get these ideas that are coming out through this process actually completed, rather than just putting a plan together and saying, well, that was nice, that was fun, let's put that on the shelf. Never see that. And just on the next slide, just a sample of how a plan can really work for you. Again, just kind of running with the Madera theme. You know, they had a corridor in their town center that they wanted to see improvements on, both from a land use perspective and from an infrastructure perspective. We went to the community with a lot of different alternatives of what that corridor could look like and what kind of land uses could be along that corridor. We got a lot of community feedback. There was a lot of political support in the community to get things done behind that project. And we were able to secure $7.2 million for a town of 9,000 to redo their entire downtown corridor. We also helped rewrite their zoning code so that some of the challenges they were having in their town center could be addressed in the future. And with that, the last slide there, we just have our contact info on there, and I open it up to questions.
Question, Mr. Bittner.
So I kind of have like a two-part. So I would say, first question, most of your projects, would you say it's city-owned property or public-owned? You're dealing with people, other people that own it?
Yeah, I mean, when we're doing planning work, it's both. A lot of times we're, you know, looking at it from an overall city perspective, and a lot of the properties that, you know, we're suggesting future land uses for are privately owned. It's, you know, really all future land use map is the plan to eventually update the zoning code to match whatever uses we're proposing. So you're talking about private properties and potential land use changes or zoning changes. Yes.
The reason I ask that is because it's probably known most of our land here is developed. Sure. We don't have much that's undeveloped. So that was the second question. You guys work mostly with developed land, undeveloped land, mixed.
The whole gamut. Madera was almost probably the same as you guys, 95% developed. We work in inner ring suburbs, we work on the edge, we work in townships, we work in villages that have been around for 100 years and don't have any development land. We just finished the plan in Poland. That was very similar. There wasn't much that was going to change. There was a couple parcels that we knew because there was some schools that were getting closed. We had an opportunity to maybe change the future land use there to a more suitable use. But for the most part, they were built out as well. So, you know, we work in all those scenarios.
So like your Burger King, former Burger King lot, for example, that's one that could plan. Maybe that's something you want to reimagine. It's something other than a drive. Maybe it's something where you have a building closer to the street that's a little more walkable in the park. But those are the kind of things you'd explore in the plan.
Other questions?
I was curious what your fee is based on.
I mean, we are, you know, really it's just a matter of how intense the public engagement effort is and what type of plan you're looking to do, the scope of the plan. I don't know what you guys are thinking. I know I talked to the mayor. He said that you guys don't really have a comprehensive plan. You know, comprehensive plan for a place of this size would be something depending on how much engagement you want to do. So we usually work on a lump sum basis. We kind of take the risk on ourselves a little bit. We put you know, it's us, and we don't have people above us telling us what we can and can't do. We kind of work a little bit without a net there and say, hey, we'll work for a lump sum fee. We'll have a general scope. But if, you know, there's additional things that you want to see as we're going along in the process, we usually just sort of, hey, just do it, get it done.
we've never asked for a client for a change order or additional fee to finish our scope, and all our contracts are written that we don't get paid our final sum until we have a complete plan that's approved by planning commission. Approved by council. So that's the risk on us that we're.
Other questions? Anybody in the audience have a question they'd like to ask?
You go for funding your grants. How successful are you on that? Is it percentage wise? Do you spend any opportunity for us to get funding?
Sure. I mean, I don't have percentages. Successful, say, but you know, if you have a good project and go through a planning process, there's a decent chance that the state route. Got a lot of transit on it as well. If there were infrastructure groups on that corridor, I'm sure we could find some money.
The degree of probability, increase in what it's more local. So if it's regional funding through Directa, you put a plan in front of them, that's a better shot. State a little bit harder, and then something at the federal level, that might be a 1 in 3. So it's the higher.
And what usually gets funded the most, is it transportation? Or is it convention? Because I have code out there, you also have a ODNR, you work with ODNR.
Sure. We work with ODNR and quite a bit. We got also many funds there, Department for the funds. They're all funded. They're pretty aligned with program. So yeah, we really try to expand the campus as far as the source leverage, and that's sort of always our home. Always. To go after federal grants from that program, we're always doing research, we're always looking for new funding sources that we may have missed or do, so that we always have this backup. Got a project that meets the criteria of some of these. You're honest or not bad. That's pretty good. That's what the planning process does. But it's,
Find that cities with a plan usually have a high.
a lot of it's funders want like two things. They want to know that if they give you the funding, that you're actually going to go through. They need to get funding. You say, you know what? Public like this project, we got the funding. We're not going to do this anymore. But they also want to see engagement. They want to see that the public has come out, is behind, or are behind the projects that are proposed at this point. And that's always a scoring criteria. Every funder is where's the plan, where's the post. So the plan is critical.
On the criteria. There's always the advantage. And the funding you're talking about, the line should match. And that's the number. We really need to make decisions. Saving for whatever project. That's how we're.
question though.
I would say for distressed communities, a lot of times they'll wait. Sometimes that 20% will actually go. State grants can be 20%, 25%. Sometimes you get points as an applicant for full action. Of a challenge. So sometimes what you do is you pair it. The state grant first, and you have, a little bits of the general fund revenue here, match, but then you turn around and go into the state funds you secure as your federal, local, not federal, state funds. And you can state money, through the state money. It gets happened. But those are things we think about in the process, and we have a realistic conversation about what you can take out based on your budgets. And long term, this ties into your land use planning. If you develop with, some storefronts or different things, the long increase here, maybe you can increase your tax base and generate some additional general funds. Chicken and anything that invests in infrastructure planning, that development wants. But you need a development to get the tax revenues papers. So that's where tax increment financing or simply bonding for projects.
I just saw it. Funding and just using it. There are people. That's all I. You can't be deceiving. There are ways to generate. For the most part, 95% of the money. We're gonna have to come up, we're just gonna have to budget for these projects. These are things that planning process, starting the planning process. All months that we're putting together, and then these are annual funding sources to put in, you're talking about the whole. Putting it in. You do have time to start to think about allocate funds for those. And you get a lot. Sources to do that. So it doesn't all happen overnight. There are some projects that are small, you get one funding source. It is a lot, but usually once you get one or two other funders want to be the last. They want to be the one to hold the flag up and say, hey, look at me, we finished this project, we put the last bit of money in. So once you get the first one going, it tends to get easier. It's hitting the first.
Related to that, is talk to your experience of working where you included a non-government entity active, development of a LLC or some development corporation that was a private-public partnership that made some of those things actually happen outside of the financing body of government, either council or administration.
Good example of that's what's called a corporation. So there's quasi-governmental, it's the affiliated with the city government, or sometimes it's not the agents of. But without getting into all the issue, they have some ability to go and acquire property, potentially on behalf of the city. And then, unlike the city, that just basically has to sell something for the highest bidder, more or less. They can go out and have a quality-based selection for a development site. You align with our comprehensive plan.
I'm aware of that process. Have you done that?
Yes, so we actually had, the city was only 9,000. They weren't quite comfortable taking the step administratively and creating their own CIC. They had one in the 80s and the fund, there was some bad blood. So that, but they joined the county. So they were able to funnel funds for that, and use the county's assets. Yeah, so it saves them. because they're very small. City manager, assistant city manager.
Thank you. Last question that's related to, I'll just make. My first question was a follow-on his, so this is really my question. The city has changing demographics like every city does. We have shifting of all, of Cleveland out from rural in, a variety of things. Can you talk about your experiences in looking at the demographics as a static and then as a dynamic over a 3-year, 5-year, 10-year? What have you done in that regard?
Yeah, I think when we do any comprehensive plan, demographics are sort of part of that assessment phase I talked about there, looking at the past demographics, where you're at today, and projecting where you might be in the future. I think a good example of that is the village of Poland, sort of on the edge of Youngstown, has a section that's very, very wealthy, and has a section that is not so wealthy. Both in age and demographic, right? So, you know, we kind of, there are conditions that, there are existing issues that they have now that need to be addressed. But there's also some things that they think about the future. How do they want to continue to attract young families to aging city? So there are recommendations that sort of navigated those channels as well, sort of looking into started to see some younger families moving in. How do we continue to attract those younger families from a housing perspective to bring in or step in and step down housing? Some people in the community and bring new people in, step into bigger houses as they continue. So demographics are always key.
Last questions.
Yes, so online, go ahead. Sorry.
That's a good question. So you said this just themselves.
Yeah. In both, we, this is where you travel quite a bit around. We have a couple of contract employees that we work with as well. So we started the firm, and it's us, and hire us, you would see. But usually when you do plans of this scale, you're talking 3 maybe 4 people working on it. Yeah, that's.
More specific.
Yeah.
And just, you said you did the planning, something, it's been a big project, or what was the size?
There's, about 9,000. So, yeah, I think like you guys, that they're similar in that they never had a comprehensive plan. Again, the city's been around 70 years, inner ring suburb of Cincinnati, because they're in the hills, they don't feel inner ring. But similar bedroom community, one commercial corridor district, no big, heavy commercial industrial land use, it's just not the right setup, not the right great access. Solid demographics that have gone up quite a bit in that area, the next Indian Village, the wealthiest community in the entire states. A lot of the states, that type of thing. So some of those people shop down at the there, which helps, you know, as far as business attraction. But it also drives up real estate prices. People hanging on to one parcel here and there. But just to kind of a snapshot of what we did down there was we had a steering committee comprised of planning commission, which was 7 members, and then 8 members at large that were nominated by planning commission as volunteers. And that 15-member group met 4 times across the year-long planning process. There were 5 elections, and they met at each one of those 4 sets of lines. Under that steering committee, this is very intense efforts. We had 4 working. So one working group was active transportation. We want to walk and bike to stores, to schools, to parks and recreation. Another group was economic development. We want to see some storefronts, some community-based and scale retail, maybe a ground floor restaurant with 1 or 2 stories or office or park. So nothing massive, nothing with those who fit community care. Another group was community facilities, which is more or less parks and recreation. They only really had 1 large community park. And then there was a housing group that looked at neighborhood issues, the type of housing pressures they were facing. They faced a lot of tear down, but we were tearing down a nice $250,000 Cape Cod. They were built with some people. So these were all issues that went on in each working group. Those 4 groups each met 3 times across the planning process. Each group had a liaison as a member of the steering committee. What was powerful about that was the liaison reported back to the steering committee with us there, saying this is what this group said, rather than the consultant as we filtered it. And in his words, he said this was. We remember really taking ownership of that group. The other things that we did that Ryan kind of touched on, business interviews, we had a dozen of those. Those were facilitated with us by a community member who actually did that before they retired for a large corporation. So they were very skilled at asking questions, and because it came from a member of the community, it was just a whole different atmosphere during the questioning. And that volunteer from the working group actually is now on planning commission. He's actually a founding member of the tree commission. They're now Tree City USA. So it's just kind of organically collecting people and bringing it into the process and getting more feedback. So I think that's how we got a lot of community support for it. That's why we were able to point to all these grants that gave people these events, and they said they wanted a more walkable, livable environment. And I think that's why they've been successful in getting the zoning code updated. I started to see some small improvements.
People didn't mention is that we finished the plan contract, plan done. We've been working with them on all non-contract to help them implement the plan on your annual basis, up to a certain amount of money. You may not get there in that year at all. It's really just up to the community as to when they want to bring us in to meet any of the tasks and how they want to goes down there every month. Meet the planning commission, make sure that they're still focusing on the plan. They've got 50% of their recommendations complete from the plan 3 years ago. So working on others, they're very ambitious to take what was in the plan and actually get it done. They've been using us to facilitate that through everything from zoning code updates, grants, economic development strategy. So it's really the whole gamut. That's why we kind of highlight that as sort of the most child of all places to support that. They've really taken the implementation step to heart. We have other places where we've done a couple things. We have similar contracts, but just not as much sustained interest. But I think because they're a smaller community, because that was their first sort of effort into this, that really got into the process and really pushed.
Yeah, and I would just say, Madera as an example, they had a city manager, Tom Mulder, who's retiring at the end of this year. He's been there, I think, 34 years now. It's in the twilight of his career. And he was never able to get council until we did this plan in 2018 to allocate the money to do a comprehensive plan. Because it's really an out-of-pocket expense. There's not too many grants out there unless you're stressed to go and pay for this. They finally answered up for this. Former mayor, who was a council member at the time, really pushed and pointed to the grant funding sources and said, 5 points here for having a plan in place, 5 points for public engagement, those type of things. She drove it across the finish line as far as getting the funds allocated, and they've been very successful ever since. But again, a community that did not have a plan for 70 years now undertaking that effort.
Yeah, we have one final question up here for online.
Okay, Susan Lenahan, she would like to know that. Lost it. In general, would you say that the clients obtain a return on investment that offsets the expense of consulting with them?
Yeah, I would say so. The community's got to be interested in having us help them implement the plan. But there have been communities that do it on their own and receive funding. That we work for North Wales, and they just got some funding for some recommendations out of our plan. They have staff to go after grants. They really need our services on the heel end of the plan. So yeah, it really it varies. But I would say that if you're focused on implementing the plan, yeah, that almost all of the plans that we put together, that people are interested in going after funding, they receive some level of funding. We have some cool graphics that I didn't have in this presentation that highlight that point, but if you want those, I can send them to you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your time coming here tonight.
Yeah, thanks for giving us the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does the mayor have any other
I
updates?
do, along the same lines, we are forming the Community Development Citizens Advisory Committee. The committee will review matters relative to community development and advise the administration and or council concerning these matters. The committee has 5 members, 4 residents appointed by me. The 5th member is a member of city council appointed by the council president. Term for each resident is 2 years. The appointed residents must be registered voters and have lived in the city for at least 2 years. If interested, please send a letter of interest via email to me at mayor@citymll.org or deliver the letter of interest to City Hall. Also want to go over the fire department report for July. There were 86 calls for service, 20 fire service calls, 66 rescue EMS calls. Of the 66 calls, 14 calls were for invalid assist. One of the calls was for an overdose requiring Narcan. Training, our full-time firefighters, Dave Ania, Jeremy Campaign, and Justin Corby, completed Alma Career Center's Fire Officer 1 and 2 course. On July 3rd, the department oversaw the fireworks display at Winter Harbor Yacht Club. On July 30th, the department was able to stop by the Fern Drive Block Park. During the month of July, both of our fire engines completed and passed the annual NFPA pump certification. The aerial truck did need some maintenance due to its age in order to pass. Council did receive a copy of this from the chief. Part of the narrative that he included, and I'll read this. The fire department has reached a critical level in staffing. We're currently running at minimum staffing on almost every shift. Recently, we have had 2 part-time members resign and 2 others get hired full-time at other departments. They've requested a leave of absence, which is unpaid, while they complete their probationary period, which is 1 to 2 years. This gives us 19 active members to fill 24 shifts. Although we currently have 2 applicants in the process, if hired, we will still be short. As we continue to wait for the results of the SAFER grant, I believe we need to hire more full-time personnel, regardless of if we are awarded the grant or not. As I stated in my 5-year growth plan in April of last year, in the near future, we need to plan on hiring more full-time firefighters as candidates taking the classes want to have a career in the fire service. With 2 full-time personnel on each shift, this would reduce the part-time shifts and give us 19 to 23 personnel to fill 12 part-time shifts. This would put the department in a much better position when we need to fill shifts arise due to personnel, both full and part-time, taking time off. On July anniversaries, Battalion Chief Koniski, 31 years, Chief Pachasko, 24 years, and firefighter Jeremy Campaign has been with us for 12 years. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Administrative Director, Mrs. Bartone, good evening.
Good evening. The agenda tonight is ordinance number 11. These are for grass cutting yard maintenance from May and June. Due to staffing shortage, this is the first one receiving this season, so none of these have been paid. They're well over the 30-day mark. I appreciate it if you could pass it tonight. The second ordinance, number 10, also goes along with staffing and reevaluating the needs of the department. We have minimum number of positions in the administration, the senior accounting clerk and the regular accounting clerk. When reviewing the current ordinances for payroll, the spreads for those were almost nothing. So the requirements and knowledge needed for the senior accounting clerk should be recognized in our code. That's why it's on the agenda.
Thank you. Law Director, Mr. Lyons, good evening.
Good evening, President. While sitting here listening on the information, I believe we're going to the internet to find out where the Airbnb man. And there is a bill on the state house. Right now, 563 that is in committee is not passed. Okay. It is a bill, if it doesn't pass, it's signed by the that would ban the municipality banning. Yeah, it's not passed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for the administration? Hearing none. We've been asked to go into executive session to discuss litigation. If someone would like to make a motion to that order. Motion made by Mr. Bittner,
I'll second it.
seconded by Mr. Morris to go into executive session. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mr. Lunder.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. We are now going into executive session. We will resume this meeting when we get back from it.
Seriously. And it says, yeah, and it works out in there. When you're gonna Okay. Well, I can't get one And I, one of the first. Oh, yeah. Well, when I have anyway.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Next year. Okay. Yeah. No, I was trying. We've been doing this for 5 years. We have this year,
Yes. Okay, make sure we're good. Keep moving on.
But I'm still back there.
Okay, call this meeting back in session. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Here.
Mr. Lunder,
Here.
Mrs. Moore. Here. Mr. Shaboo,
Here.
Mr. Morris,
Here.
Mr. Johnson,
Here. All right, board committee commission reports. The ordinance committee did not meet, is that correct?
That's correct.
No, that's after board and commission reports. I try to skip it sometimes, but not this time. Special committee.
So special committee met on the 18th. Started at 6 p.m. Present was myself, Mr. Shaboo, Ms. Moore, Mr. Morris, Mr. Johnson, and members of the public. We discussed ordinance 1242.025 and its proposed amendments that we're looking at adopting. We went through, we're going through it line by line. We're about halfway through. So once it's completely done, we'll present that. We had some changes as far as numbering, lettering that we were working on. We'll set another meeting to finish that off.
Council of the Whole met on Monday, July 18th at 7 p.m. Present were Mr. Shaboo, Mr. Morris, myself, Mr. Bittner, Mr. Lunder, Mrs. Thompson, and Mrs. Moore. Topics were the Hannah Group proposal to provide professional advisory and real estate services in the business district and revisions of the community reinvestment area code 893.04. Council decided that they wanted to hear from other companies, which we just did tonight as a start, and see how much others are and what they may offer and what other options are available. We reviewed proposed changes to the CRA, including scaled down reduction of the tax abatement over time, increase the threshold for remodeling to 15,000 to reflect more significant improvements to housing stock, greater tax abatement for homes built from previously developed lots to be 15 years versus previously undeveloped lots, 10 years. Proposed a cap on the annual abatement to $4,000. Proposed amending the remodeling threshold for commercial, industrial, or multifamily to $25,000. Proposed requiring all applications for exemptions to be made within 6 months of completion, and further stipulating that no consideration may be given for applications received after the tax assessment of the new construction or remodel. Okay. Parks and Recreation, that did not meet, is that correct?
That got canceled.
Okay. Planning and Zoning Commission. And you were not there for it, so he wasn't technically allowed to, so we will not have a report for that, technically. Yeah, Kevin. All right, open to the public to speak. We will now open this portion of the meeting to the public. If you would like to speak, please come to the lectern and state your name and address for the record. You can wrestle for it. She's gonna win.
Nicholas Lorber, 7416 Larkspur Drive. Good evening, Mr. President. Good evening, Council, Mr. Mayor. First thing I wanted to discuss was the ordinance that was passed quite some time ago on the cats. Now, there's a resident Goldenrod, and we are confident that she is not found. we are seeing new cats once every 2 months. Whether they be new to the area, adult cats, or they be kittens. Okay, we have had, we found frozen kittens in the wintertime, you know, that we've had to discard. You know, heartbreaking, right? Love an live cat at home. But, we want to know who's responsible for enforcing, this ordinance. And, or, you know, what steps can we take as neighbors to guide her? She's an older lady, okay, to guide her to making sure that she's following this ordinance and that I'm happy and my neighbors are happy.
Okay, so just to clarify for the open the public to speak portion, this portion of the meeting is to allow you guys to speak to us. We don't actually respond. So the best suggestion I have is for you to discuss that with the administration right after the meeting. But this portion of the meeting is really just for you guys to tell us your concerns, but not to have a back and forth during this period.
Okay, well, I have a concern about the ordinance and that the ordinance is not being enforced. That's a good word. Okay?
Okay.
Enforced strictly, no.
Thank you.
So when can I speak to get a response then? Right after the meeting? Okay.
Anybody else like to speak tonight?
Yes. I have a question also, but probably for administration. And talk to them.
Okay. All right, then we will close this portion of the meeting to the public. Legislation before council, ordinance number 2022-0-10. If you'll please read it by its title.
Ordinance number 2022-0-10. An ordinance to amend the 2022 payroll ordinance 2022-0-02 and declaring an emergency.
Any questions on the ordinance?
Once again, this ordinance for this payroll, is it is to straighten out a problem with the spread?
It's to increase the spread from the basic accounting assistant and the senior accounting assistant. There's a different set of skills required for each, and right now they're very similar.
Is the room for this in the budget?
Yes. Not asking for appropriations.
She's not asking for any appropriation changes.
Can I ask a question? Does this need to be approved tonight? Or
There's no reason not to, in my opinion. I mean, it was right, it would be the end of September. Not that I'm gonna make a change right now, but this is something that needs to be addressed. I'm still running with 2.5 people in the office. So in order to get qualified individuals, I need to be able to offer proper salaries.
This was for a current employee, correct?
Lori Lane Smith, she's been an employee here for
Got
approximately 30 years. We would like to retain.
Any other questions?
Suspend the rules.
Motion to suspend the rules by Mr. Lunder, seconded by Mr. Morris. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mr. Lunder,
Aye.
Mrs. Moore, Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Motion for passage.
Motion approved by Mr. Lunder, seconded by Mr. Morris. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mr. Lunder.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. The ordinance is passed. Ordinance number 2022-0-11, if you please read it by its title.
Ordinance number 2022-0-11. An ordinance levying liens for expenses incurred for lawn maintenance and or culvert repairs.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
So made.
Made by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mr. Lunder. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mr. Lunder,
Aye.
Mrs. Moore, Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Motion for passage. Second.
Made by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mr. Lunder. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mr. Lunder,
Aye.
Mrs. Moore, Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye. The ordinance is passed. Old business. Do we have any old business tonight? New business. Do we have any new business tonight? Okay, open to the public to speak. This is your second opportunity to come speak to us. Again, no responses in terms of back and forth. Does anybody wish to speak? If you would, please come to the lectern, state your name and address for the record.
Juanita Miller, Salida Road, just questioning these gentlemen that gave their presentation today. So what is your next step? I'm not just gonna answer. That's my question. And what's the next step? We got this, we got two now.
Mhm.
I think the residents would probably be interested in knowing that.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, I will close this portion of the meeting. Is open to the public. Oh, one more.
Come on, Rob, you can't get rid of
You're
that.
sneaking up on me here. Damn, I should have closed it faster.
Earl Carr, 7523 Salida. I do have a question that's lingering I'd love to see happen, and that is if we can keep somehow the website, keep it current and updated so we can attend the meetings and know what the meetings are about more. Like the special committee meeting, you adopted something, but I don't know what it was, and I don't know. I have to play the tape back to find out what you guys are doing to the ordinance or something. And so it would be really nice if we could take a look at the website as a group and figure out how we can get that so it's easier to follow, and easier for us to see what meetings are coming up and what we can do so that as a community, we can stay engaged. That's all I have to say, guys.
Thank you.
all the meetings are on the website. As soon as I get them on the website.
Yes, but I think it would be beneficial if committee chairs would actually put an agenda out before their meeting, and you can put it on the website. Everybody can agree to that. That way the public can know exactly what's going to be covered at your meetings. And also, when you set meeting times tonight or any other night, go ahead and say what your topics are going to be. That way. Yes. All right, announcements and settings of meetings. What do we have? Yes.
Tentatively, there's a Parks and Rec committee meeting set for August 24th. We don't have a chair or a vice chair anymore. So
Musical chairs and see who ends up with that one.
if anybody shows up,
That was
August
Parks and Rec, August 24th. And what time is that normally? That's 7 or 6? 6 o'clock. Thank you. It's been so long since they've had one, I couldn't remember.
So looking for volunteers.
Yeah, so if anyone would like to serve on the Parks and Rec board, we have multiple spots open again, so we encourage you.
Planning and zoning, the next meeting is September 12th,
Planning and zoning, September 12th.
and I believe they're at 17.
6 p.m.
6 p.m.
Yes, sir.
community development.
Community development.
I think you're on there, aren't you? I think Desiree's on it also. Get together. to do it wrong. It's up to you. It's not. And I think Desiree said that the Thursday was better for her, didn't she? Okay. Probably do that. Wait, fifth. That's a Thursday. Yes. We'll do August 25th at 7 p.m.
So that's community development, August 25th at 7 p.m. Is that what you said?
Yes, sir.
Mr. President.
Yes, sir.
So when I said agenda, I meant for that to tell us what they were going to talk about. That's what you did.
Yes.
Just so we can write that down.
Yes.
And on the agenda will be a review of the first group that came in to give us about the background. And I did some research on that. It's in Willowick, and to discuss the possibilities for Willowick Beach Park.
I know ordinance committee has gotten backed up with a lot of stuff.
That's an understatement.
Can you refresh my memory? What's all in the ordinance committee right now?
Well, we have a draft for the golf carts. A draft for the questions we discussed. I got some questions answered that I forwarded on to Desiree about the items in the right of way or tree line. I sent it to her. Yes.
Okay, anything else you guys still have on your agenda?
I'm sure there's probably a lot of stuff I don't remember.
Okay, well, all
We
three-
have a few that we'd like to.
Yes.
Yeah, there was stuff about a
The
house
Aqua
on
Ohio
Shamrock.
fees,
about
the Aqua Ohio fees.
Ohio fees, that one I don't recall.
February sent something out. to you guys. Rental inspections,
Yes.
Rental inspections,
you talked about driveways,
driveway.
golf carts, bench.
I thought we did the golf cart. Just had to come up in council.
Yeah.
We did the right of way stuff.
And again, I had sent some information out to the Alliance, he responded, got back to me, I sent up to the chair and that's all.
All right, well,
We need to,
being the chair that I am,
can I just?
I'm
send them
going to
on
start
through?
taking all of it away from you guys.
Can I just send the ones that we have on?
Send them
through?
over to us. We're gonna have a committee of the whole meeting. We're just gonna start moving this stuff forward because we're just way too backed up on this. And so we need to start moving it forward. I mean, Des can't help the fact that her work has gotten her all screwed up right now, so we are just going to take control here. So let's see, so golf carts, I definitely want to cover that one because that one's already pretty much done and we just need to,
That and the fence is already there.
golf carts, fence, right of way. We'll try to cover rental inspection and then I don't remember what Aqua Ohio is, so I have to look that up still.
I'll find it.
Remind me, because I don't recall that at all.
There was also something that Mrs. Bartone had sent us about somebody backfilling a culvert ditch over on Shamrock, I believe it was. We were asked to look at that as well.
Yeah, I don't think we'll get through that in the committee, the whole meeting. I think this is enough for now. We'll just try to grind some of these things for it, but thank you.
It's up to speed.
I don't want to leave, ordinance without something to do in their time. All right. So who's available next Tuesday, the 16th? The room's available. Who's available the 23rd? I know everybody should be. It's a council meeting that we're not having, so
I'd rather do it the 16th.
I'm making a special point for 16th.
you can't be there. I know you're medically out.
Our special committee, we gotta finish off this.
You're doing your special committee on the 16th? Well, not if I make a meeting for you,
Why not do them both?
No. we're
because he
in-
never finishes.
we're in time.
16th is bad for you, so
That's the only thing.
okay. So otherwise, we could do
I'm doing
the
15th.
18th. How does the 18th look? I assume police training is over by then. It says 7 AM, so I didn't know how long that lasts, but I'm assuming it's done by then. So 18th, does 18th work for everybody?
Yep.
Okay,
7.
yeah, let's do 7 PM on the 18th. Okay, so again, we're gonna cover golf carts, fence changes, right of way. We'll try to get to rental inspections and maybe Aqua, Ohio. Yes.
It is. Okay. Special committee, how about the 15th?
With the,
So it's us 3. Michelle, do you need 7? What's that?
6 or 7.
Well, if we could do 6, we'll do 6. 6 PM. That committee will be reviewing the ordinance. What?
The 15th is the standing night for ordinance.
Right, that's now gonna be a special committee night.
So we're gonna change-
Ordinance hasn't been having that as a standing meeting, but we're keeping it
Update the
warm.
website so that we're all on the same
Yes, gotcha.
All right, so the special committee will be going over ordinance 1242.025 and its proposed replacement of C2 and C3.
And it's on the 15th.
Yes.
Yes.
It's
6 PM.
Any other committees? Okay, the next regular agenda meeting will be held on Thursday, September 8th at 6 PM. The next regular meeting of council will be September 13th at 7 PM. So again, there is no council meeting on the 23rd of August. Is there a motion to adjourn?
so made. Second.
Made by Mr. Morris and seconded by Mr. Shaboo. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mr. Lunder.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. This meeting is adjourned.